There's a lot being written right now about the moral decay in America. Every few days, there seems to be some new mass shooting. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. People are becoming very apathetic as it relates to politics. Trying to get people to get out to vote is a challenge. The number of children being born out of wedlock has skyrocketed. In fact, I looked at this statistic. This is from the Washington Times, Tuesday, June the 5th of last year. It says, since the 1960s, statistics guiding out-of-wedlock birth rates have soared from around 24% for blacks and 3% for whites to 64% in 1990 for blacks and 18% for whites. That's just in 1990. I'm sure that has stabilized some, but you can see the family in North America is disintegrating. It is literally falling apart. Parents are often not present to raise their children in the way that they were in generations past. And as a result, traditional family values are disappearing. When there are no parents around to spend that time and to transfer those values, they don't get transferred. And so kids are growing up without a moral compass very often. You know, Americans used to value family, integrity, moral character, hard work. This is true for Canadians as well. These are things that we used to really pride ourselves on. But the American dream has become corrupted. It has basically become outright selfishness, the more that you analyze it. There's actually a documentary on Amazon Video right now that shows just how bad things have gotten. I want you to watch just a part of the trailer for this. Take a look.
If I want to work 100 hours a week and never see my family and die at an early age, that's my prerogative.
I would have money as big as this room. Encase it.
33 pounds of gold and diamonds given to me by superstars of the world.
I love money. Come to me.
I've been a photographer for 25 years, with my lens focused on wealth. I noticed that no matter how much people had, they still want more. I want to figure out why our obsession with wealth has grown. It seemed to be a shift in the American dream.
I know the names of the Kardashians better than I know the names of my neighbors.
This fictitious lifestyle fuels this sense of inadequacy.
I have the classic Birkin in almost every color.
The bags start 20,000, go up.
I realized wealth was much more than money. It was whatever gave us value. Fame, sex, even plastic surgery for dogs.
It's kind of like the end of Rome. Societies accrue their greatest wealth at the moment that they face death.
Now, a little warning about this video, if you choose to watch it. It has an R rating on it. There are some sexually explicit clips in it. I think that they did this for the shock value. My wife and I watched it together the other night, and we zipped through a few sections, which is kind of too bad because here's the thing. The documentary is spot on in terms of what's happening in America today. The producer, Lauren Greenfield, grew up in California and attended some of the same schools that some of the celebrities that you know about today attended when they were children. Her career as a photojournalist has centered around various cultural hot topics over the years. But in Generation Wealth, she exposes just how corrupt the American dream has become, and it is disturbing. It's very disturbing. Miro magazine actually says it this way. They give it 5 out of 5 stars, but they say one of the most vulgar, sickening, and deeply thought-provoking films you'll see all year. And it is very disturbing. Guys, I want you to know that this decay is not just an American thing. It is a Western thing. All of the Western world is going in this direction. May I remind you that over the long weekend, we had 17 shootings here in Toronto. Toronto the Good. 17 shootings. Now, apparently no one got killed, so we're terrible shots, okay? But lucky for us. But seriously, 17 shootings over the long weekend. What is going on with our society? All of the same misguided values are creeping into Canadian culture, especially here in the GTA. People are working longer and longer hours. They're spending less and less time with family. Kids are getting little to no moral guidance. People have become obsessed with wealth, with fame, and with pleasure. Remember those three words: wealth, fame, and pleasure. This is what everybody has become obsessed with. And you can see it here in our city as much as you can see it anywhere in America today. You go to the Milton Mall on the weekend. First of all, you won't find a parking spot. But secondly, you'll get in there, and all of the places that are selling these ridiculously expensive handbags, there are lines of people. Lines of people. Everywhere you look, you see this decay. You go on Instagram, young people, scantily clad images that they're posting. Like, who's guiding these children? The obsession that people have with pleasure. This is what we're seeing everywhere that we look. And the most disturbing part is that the younger generation doesn't even know any better. They don't even know any better because no one's taught them anything different. They didn't grow up watching Leave It to Beaver like some of us did, or going to Sunday school like some of us did. Most of these kids have no reference point. I recognize more and more, I'm getting older. I'm going to be turning 49 this week. 49. I'm getting old. But at least I look at it sometimes and say, but at least I have a reference point. I remember the world before the internet and before, some of the crazy stuff that we experience today. Kids grow up in it. They don't know anything different. We forget this sometimes. They don't know anything different. For them, this obsession with wealth and fame and pleasure is completely normal. It's all that they know. So life is this game of one-upmanship for them. Whoever gets the best toys, visits the nicest places, and accrues the most likes wins. That is what life has been reduced to for most people. And it doesn't matter what it takes to get there. You need to do whatever it takes to latch onto that, right? Grab life by the horns, get everything that you can out of life, and don't worry what anyone thinks about you. If you get what you want in life, you are a success. This is what society teaches us. There was a day, I remember growing up, when women who, you would hear in the news that they appeared in a porn magazine or something, that it was a shameful thing. Like, it created a real outrage. People would get upset. Individuals and even businesses would boycott that person or any films or products that they were endorsing. Nowadays, you know what happens if that happens for someone, even their own parents will applaud it. Like back in the day, their parents would even ostracize them very often. Some of you young people are like, really? Yes, this is the way the world was. But now it's like celebrate. It's like, yeah, my kid made it. Today, most parents would be proud. And in a world where we've always considered ourselves higher than animals, we're actually acting with less moral quality than animals. There are no moral absolutes. And you know what? Here's the thing. You can be sitting here this morning and listening to me describe all of this stuff, right? All of the ways that we have become corrupt, and you're not even thinking that you're part of it. But you are. Because this is the frog in the kettle syndrome. You see, you live in this society. I live in this society. And if you think that it hasn't impacted you, you're wrong. Every one of us has been infected by this decay. Every one of us is influenced by the society around us. I wish that I could say that wealth and fame and pleasure have not influenced me. I know they have. I wish that I could say that Christians, live differently than most people do in our society, but they don't. Most don't. Think about it. Most Christians in the GTA, most of them are mostly driven by money and success. They may go to church, they may do some nice things, but they're mostly driven by money and success. They prioritize their kids' education over their spiritual development. I can tell you that for a fact, because they'll get upset if their kids don't do their homework, but if they don't do an assignment for Sunday school or for youth group, they don't even know. So they're prioritizing education. Why? Because they want their kid to be successful, be rich, be happy, get it all. Most Christians in the GTA will still put sports ahead of church. Most will still spend more on leisure than they will on God's work. Most will set no limits on what they watch or listen to. They will watch or listen to the exact same things that everyone else does in the society. You'll see parents putting little kids into dance classes where they move in all kinds of sexual ways and wear very sexual getup as they dance to very sexual lyrics. They will, and they will think nothing of it. And a lot of Christians in the GTA would violate the values that they say that they hold to if it meant getting what they really, really want. Guaranteed. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Especially, mark this, especially a relationship that they want. I've seen it. They'll cash in everything. So here's the fact, guys, that I want you to see. It's the sad truth. Most Christians are not getting their cues from the Bible today, but from culture. It's the truth. Welcome back to Red Letter Summer. This is the series where we're looking into the Bible to see what Jesus says about topics that are very, very relevant. And we're looking at these red letters to see what Jesus himself would say about topics that impact us. And today we're in for a doozy if you haven't figured it out yet. In this series, we're looking at the words of Jesus, and we're taking 10 of the most common themes, things that he spoke about, and we're breaking them down for you. And this is week 7 today, and here is the theme: have godly priorities. It is something that Jesus talked about over and over and over again. As he went around the countryside and he spoke to people in a lot of different ways, he was telling them, prioritize God. Prioritize God's kingdom. Stop thinking about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear. Stop thinking about all the things that you want in life. Put God first. Make him your priority. This is what Jesus taught everyone everywhere he went. Jesus told his followers that they needed to be the salt of the culture. You ever think about like salt in the world? I think a lot of times about the oceans because we talk a lot today about pollution and, where everything goes. I remember as a kid we used to joke around, what happens when somebody throws garbage in the river? Where does it go? We'd say, away, right? Out into the ocean. You think that it's a blessing that God made the ocean full of salt because there's a lot of stuff out there that needs to be purified. This is the impact that salt has, and God wants us to be the salt of the culture. But Christians today have actually become part of the problem. Look at this quote from Tobias Stone, writing for Medium.com. This is from August in 2017. He says, just over 70% of Americans questioned by the Pew Research Center identify as Christian, and 63% of Americans absolutely believe in God. 1/3 of Americans say the Word of God should be taken literally. The United States is predominantly Christian, a predominantly Christian, God-fearing nation. But then Tobias Stone goes on in that article to describe just how pathetic Christians are. How they are doing anything but being the salt in the culture oftentimes. I talk to people who come here from other countries. And I can tell you guys, if you don't know, and many of you have come from other places, but sometimes for those of us that have grown up here, we're ignorant to this. People that come here from other places, do you know what? They equate Christianity with hedonism and immorality. They do, because they say, well, the United States and Canada, Christian nations, and this is the product of a Christian nation. That's what they say. Guys, I personally believe that North American culture is at a tipping point. We still have this veneer of civility and morality, but it's paper thin. It's this veneer, and very often it breaks and you see stuff coming up through it. All of this garbage that we've been stuffing down under it for decades now. But it's paper thin. Just below the surface, if you were to look below it, you're going to see there's a world here where anything goes. Anything goes. Just don't tell the people, right? Just don't post it in certain places, but anything goes in our society today. We're rotting from the inside out. Ask any police officer what they're seeing on a daily basis. Ask any psychologist the conversations that they're having with people that are going. Ask any pastor who is meeting with people and seeing the breakdown of the family, the breakdown of our young people on an ongoing basis. People are on the edge. They are stressed out. They are heavily medicated. They are overextended physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially, and their relationships are generally a mess. And if something doesn't change soon, we are going to be facing a serious social crisis in North America. I'm not trying to be any kind of a doomsday prophet. I'm just telling you the facts. This is really what's going on. And the truth is, whenever a culture becomes wealthy and decadent, this is what happens. This isn't anything new. Any sociologist that's studied this, any anthropologist can go back in history and look and see the pattern that when a nation or an empire becomes wealthy and decadent, that over time it rots. Isaiah actually addressed it with the nation of Israel almost 3,000 years ago. Look at what he said. Jerusalem staggers. Judah is falling. Their words and deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. The look on their faces testifies against them. They parade their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them. They have brought disaster upon themselves. Israel went through the same progression. God brought them to this amazing land. He said, be careful when you get to this place. It's going to be flowing with milk and honey. It's going to be awesome. You'll be able to have everything that you want in this place. But be careful, because I'm telling you now, you're going to forget God. And it's exactly what they did. And years later, the decline. They go into exile. The Egyptians and the Babylonians before them had the same thing happen. The Romans had the same thing happen after them. And any society or person that abandons godly priorities is bound to fall. This is what happens. So, we're going to look at what Jesus says today about priorities. This is really important stuff. What does it mean to have godly priorities? I'm going to show you using the words of Jesus today in keeping with our Red Letter series. Well, the first thing that it means is that we're not supposed to live for physical goals. Don't live for physical goals. Take notes of these things, guys. Don't live for physical goals. Matthew chapter 6, what does Jesus say? Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, we've heard these words many times before, but guys, I really want you to focus on what we're talking about here this morning and priorities. When he talks about treasures on earth, what is he talking about? He's talking about physical goals. Those things that you latch onto in life, these physical goals that you have. They are things that can be destroyed or stolen, like he says here in the passage. This is why he says, don't chase them, because they can be destroyed and they can be stolen. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, many people found out just how unstable wealth and possessions are. People that were rolling in money were destitute on the street overnight. One of those thieves that stole from so many people was Florian Hamm. You actually saw him in that little trailer that I showed. He currently resides in Germany because Germany does not extradite people, because he is wanted on charges of defrauding investors of around at least $200 million. So he's hiding out in Germany. In the video, if you end up watching it, you'll end up seeing here he's sitting in luxury, but later you see him in a broken down property in Germany, hiding out. And this is what he says. He says, if you think that money will buy you anything and everything, you've never, ever had money. It was a pretty powerful confession. He says, if you're one of these people that runs around, oh, if I just had a little bit more, if I just had this, I would be happy. He says, no, if you're saying that, it's evidence you've never, ever had money, because I've had it. And he says in the thing, you cannot buy the things that you really want with money. The relationships that you want, the love that you want. He tells a story about how he went somewhere with this woman, and he showed her, he was somewhere in Europe, and showed her 4 different yachts, all multi-million-dollar yachts. He showed her the 4. He says, pick one. She said, I just want to have dinner with you. If you think money will buy you anything and everything, you've never had money. Generation wealth shows that money is the main physical goal, but it takes on various forms. The form of sex, of pleasure, of fame. All of these physical goals that people set, treasures on earth. Jesus tells us that what we store up, in that place where we're storing stuff up, that's where our heart will be found. Let me ask you, where are you storing up today? What are you really concerned about? What are you investing all of your time and energy and wealth into? We have a responsibility to put our time and energy and money into non-physical things. You may put it into a physical thing, but for a non-physical end. What non-physical goals are you striving for? Those should be your priority. The second thing Jesus says about having godly priorities is it says we have to have pure desires. Again, in Matthew chapter 6, if we continue on in that passage, in verses 22 and 23, he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, in this section here, the eye represents what we focus on. It represents what we desire, that thing that we set our eyes on. And he says here, if the desire of your eye is good, then your life will be good. But if your passion is bad, wow, your whole life will be filled with darkness. And he says how great that darkness will be. Let me ask you a three-pronged question here. I want you to dig deep in your heart as I'm asking these questions. First, what do you want the most? What do you really want the most? And here's a gut check question to follow it up. What do your actions tell people that you want the most? If we were to ask around the people that know you, by your actions, what would they say that you want the most? Now, the third part of the question, when you take those two and you measure them, what needs to change? You call yourself a child of God. You call yourself a Christian. Are you living with godly priorities? Is your focus pure? Oftentimes, Christians try to hold on to God and to something else, and it renders their motives impure. And that's what we see in the next point that Jesus makes, and that's the third point here. If we're going to have godly priorities, we need to make God our singular focus. And he talks about that in the next verse in Matthew chapter 6. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And that word money, sometimes translated mammon, can refer to a lot more than just money. It can refer to all the things that go along with that. You know, when people try to serve two masters, they end up serving neither of them properly. Maybe you've had that experience in your life. You ever have two bosses trying to direct you? It doesn't work. Jesus is reinforcing what the Jews should have already known from Deuteronomy chapter 6, that love for God is supposed to be the follower of God's top priority. Jesus reminded the Pharisees of this. The Pharisees come along, they try to trip Jesus up. They were jealous of the crowds that were following him, and they were threatened by the authority that he had and the things that he was teaching. And so they come to him with a question. They say, hey, Jesus, tell us, what is the greatest commandment? Thinking that by mentioning one, he'd leave something else out and people would pounce on him. But Jesus goes back to their own scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 6, and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Guys, here's the thing. Some of us are trying to serve God plus. God plus. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I'm trying to serve God plus wealth. God plus possessions. God plus success, because I like being popular. God plus fame. God plus pleasure. And it doesn't work. See, the danger in the God plus approach, here's the danger, and you've maybe never really considered this to be the danger, but the danger in the God plus approach is that you might get that. You might get it. And the moment that you get it is the moment that you will have sold your soul for that thing. You finally get the wealth, and now that's it. That's what your life is about. It has become your master. The moment that you get it, you will have sold your soul to something that doesn't satisfy. You will have taken that space that belongs to God alone, that only God can fill, and you will have filled it with that thing. And now you are dependent on it, just like someone's dependent on a drug. This is why the God plus approach doesn't work. Matthew 10, Jesus says, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. And when you think that you've found your life, you've found your ideal life, you've actually just lost it. Like I say, you filled that place in your soul where God belongs with something else. And guys, we very easily latch onto God replacements. We see things that enamor us, and we say, that would make me happy if I just had that thing. And we finally get it, and we put it in that place, and we find out it doesn't make us happy. We need to spend time alone with God in prayer and allow Him to fill us and to transform us until He becomes our singular focus, that we see that God is all that we need. God alone can satisfy us. God alone can make us happy. God alone can give us a sense of purpose. God alone can give us hope. God alone can give us peace. All of the things that we really want, God alone is the answer. So prioritize Him. Make Him your singular focus, your one master. Number 4, here's a tough one. Jesus taught, don't let your family become your priority. This is one of the most subtle God pluses that exists. God plus my family. You see, this is subtle because we're like, family's a gift from God. Family's a wonderful thing. God told us to take care of our families, and so I make everything about my family. We do everything together. We prioritize our time together. It's always about us and the family. They convince themselves that they aren't putting God second, but in truth they are. And they say, well, God wants us to love our family, of course. Sports is a big one, right? Well, I just want the best for little Johnny, so we're going to put him in all these sports, all these activities. It doesn't have to be sports. Here's the thing. It's whatever you plan around. Whatever you're planning around, that thing is your master. That thing is what's driving your priorities. Let me ask you a really tough question. Do you plan your family around your God and church activities? Or do you plan your God and church activities around your family? That is a gut check question that every one of us needs to answer. It is a very significant question. And I'm just going to lay it on the line here this morning. I'm going to tell you. You need to understand the local church is the place that God designed to help you prioritize God. The local church. And if you're just visiting us here at Renew this morning, I want to tell you this. You need to make a good decision about where you choose for a local church. Because the local church is what God designed to help you live a life that prioritizes God. There is leadership there, there is organization there, there is structure there, there is community there, and God designed it for you. You're not supposed to be bumping around, never settling into one. God's plan for you is that you settle into a local church, you make it your community, because those people are going to help you prioritize God because you're not strong enough on your own to do it. True? True? It's true. You're not strong enough on your own to do it. I'm not either. And it's why you need to commit to a local church. Because together we remind one another what we're supposed to be prioritizing. And you need to be honest with yourself. Are you planning God and church activities around your family? Or are you planning your family activities around God and the church? I got to tell you, the Sawatsky family is a very imperfect family. You don't even know the half of it. We're a very imperfect family. But we've made one thing very, very clear and non-negotiable in our family. And that is that we orient our lives around what God's family is doing. We don't orient what they're doing around us. We are not it. Our family is not what God's doing in the world. Our family is not what we prioritize. We prioritize God's family and what God is doing through a community of people here in our city. And our family works around that. We see what's on the calendar, and we work what we're doing around what's on the calendar. You say, that's an imperfect calendar created by imperfect people. Yes, it is. But if you have an argument to make on that, you need to talk with God, because that's what He designed. And as a community, we decide what we're doing for God, and we do it together, and we plan our family stuff around it. That is the way God designed it to be. And I love my family to death. But I'm telling you what, I refuse to let them become an idol. They will not become an idol for me. And Jesus taught this very clearly. And many times in places he said things like this, Matthew 10:37, anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And we've got a lot of Christians today that say that they're children of God, but they're not worthy of Him because they're not prioritizing God above their own family. And I'm telling you what, they're in a risky place because I've seen this over and over and over, and it goes along really well for a while, but eventually, you know what happens? It all comes crashing down. Because just like the Roman Empire and just like the American Empire, when you prioritize things wrong, they will crumble. And that family that you've been investing everything in, that you've been putting ahead of everything else, it's gonna crash. And your kids that you think, oh, I poured so much into them, they're gonna hate you. They're gonna walk away from you. It's gonna be a big mess. And I'm telling you, mark my words, it will happen. Because you need to put God first in your life. He needs to come before your own family. Jesus was very clear we are to love Him most of all. And I've seen families disregard this truth only to see their own family implode. And I don't want to see that for you. A family is a wonderful blessing. A wonderful blessing. When you can get your family joining you in what God is doing, honestly, it's the favorite part of my entire life when I see my kids join in what we're doing at church. It's the favorite part of my whole life. And if you're missing that, you're missing it all. Number 5, the last one. Jesus said we need to put God's kingdom and God's rules first. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, he says, but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well. Now, God's kingdom, what do we mean by that? God's kingdom is what God is building. It's what God is doing. It is His realm of authority. It's this good society that He wants to create, a good world with His good values. It's a good place where people love one another and bless one another, and there's peace and harmony. When Jesus taught His disciples to pray, He taught them to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is what our desire is to be. That's what it is to be prioritized. That's why He taught us to pray this way, because it's prioritizing God's kingdom. There was a day not too many years ago here in Ontario that every child, every morning in their school, prayed that or recited it. Can you imagine every kid in Ontario every day when they start school being reminded that we want to make this place what God wants it to be, that we want to bring a little bit of heaven here to earth, that we need to serve other people, we need to be moral people, we need to put others ahead of ourselves. Could you imagine if everywhere in Ontario every morning this was happening? It used to. God's kingdom equals purity and kindness and humility and peace and justice and equality. It's all of the things that we want. God's kingdom is a realm where everyone submits to Him as king. You see, we live in a society where people go after, they say we want equality and we want justice, but they want to circumvent the king. We want to do it on our terms. We'll figure out our way to do it. God's kingdom is a place where people's hearts have been transformed by the love of God. Not just where they pretend to care about the things that they should care about, but where their heart has been transformed, and so they naturally do those things for others. So that's God's kingdom. He says, put God's kingdom first. And he says, all of these things will be added to you as well. All of these things here refers to our needs and our desires. He says here in the passage that these are the things that pagans run around chasing all of the time. What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to wear? Now, in that kind of a culture back in that time, the people that Jesus was speaking to, many of them were in a subsistence kind of economy. They were just trying to get by. And so he's focusing here on the needs. But all of these things also refers to the wants. And in our society, if he was talking to us today, he would talk about not only our needs, but also our wants, because we have lots of them. And he's telling us we need to leave those to God, put his kingdom first, and he'll take care of all those needs. He'll take care of all those wants. I tell people all the time that living as a Christian in 2019 in Canada is going to require managing your desires and expectations. That's the hardest part about being a Christian where we live in this day and age. Last week, someone asked me very sincerely if it's okay to indulge in travel, just one of those things that we have the opportunity to do, right? And they asked me, is it okay to just really indulge in that? And I said, well, travel is not immoral in and of itself. We live in a day and age where we have the ability and we have the wealth to do a fair bit of that, and it's a wonderful thing. But I explained that as Christians, we live for God's kingdom first. So how does that, this needs to become the question in anything, whatever you're talking about, whatever you want to indulge in, whether it's travel or pleasure or whatever, business, success, always measure it. What does it mean to put God's kingdom first? I explained to this person that vacation and travel, I've experienced that they're best kind of sprinkled in because if they become more than that, our hearts can't handle it. They start going after the wrong things. We start prioritizing the wrong things. We make an idol out of those things. Jesus' words were that we need to prioritize God's kingdom and let him add those things to us. Leave them to him. You know what? It's a wonderful thing when you see God give you those things that you want. That you're not working and clawing after them, but God actually brings them to you. Like I say, if we do it the other way around, they can easily become an idol. We prioritize them ahead of God. And this can be said about so many things: your car, your house, your education, your retirement. Stop worrying about all these things, Jesus said. Put God first, give him his due, and he will take care of the rest. Now it says there, to seek first God's kingdom, but then it also says God's righteousness. What is he talking about? Well, he's talking about basically God's rules, God's way to live right. Living with godly priorities means living inside of God's boundaries. And many Christians today, live like whatever God says in terms of rules, that they're more just suggestions, right? Oh, I hear you, Jesus. That sounds like a good suggestion. I'll keep that in mind as I go about doing the things that I want. Well, people aren't taking their moral responsibilities seriously, and as a result, the salt has lost its savor, as Jesus says in Matthew 5. The influence that we're supposed to have has become diluted and is unnoticeable to many people. Because we're doing the same things, we're chasing the same stuff, we're living the same way, we're filling our minds with the same things. They don't see any difference. Christians need to start saying no to sinful behavior and saying yes to God's righteousness, to love, to serving others. Guys, let me wrap it up by saying this. Prioritizing God's kingdom and righteousness is not going to be an easy task. In fact, Jesus described it with the words, taking up your cross and following him. Matthew 10, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. He admitted up front, this is not going to be an easy thing that he's asking. Every day as you determine to make building God's kingdom your priority and living with God's values as you do it, you're going to hit walls. Every day you're going to hit walls. People are going to resist you. They're going to resent you. Some of them are even going to persecute you. They're going to persecute us as a church. They're going to persecute you as an individual. But that's been true of everyone who has ever prioritized God, including Jesus himself. Which is why he said in Matthew 5, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." You know, we started this morning talking about treasures on earth versus treasures in heaven. And now we're wrapping it up by seeing great is your reward in heaven when you're persecuted. Guys, we just need to face the music. To be a child of God, that's what it's about. It's not about prioritizing your life and your goals. It's about prioritizing God's kingdom and what he wants to do in us as individuals, in us as a community. We make that first, and everything else comes around that. Let's pray.